Welcome to our fiscal year 2022 demonstration grants for Indian children, the Native Youth Community Projects, also known as NYCP Grant Competition webinar. We'll be providing guidance for prospective applicants today, and we're really appreciative of you joining us on a Friday. As we get going, we do have a little bit of logistics to cover with you. So you will be muted throughout the session. However, we do want your questions. So if you look for the chat box, for most of you, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat bubble, and you'll be able to click on that to open the chat box. You can post questions at any time throughout the webinar there in the chat. And then throughout, we have certain places where we'll stop and take those questions, but pop them in as they appear for you. That way you don't forget your question, and we will get to it during all of the Q&A sections. Now, the webinar is also being recorded, and it's going to be posted on the Office of Indian Education website. We did already have one of these webinars with the same content last week. That recording is already up if there are other members of your team that maybe need to watch that. And then this recording will be up by hopefully end of day Wednesday, just depending upon how quickly we can get that posted. But hopefully by end of day Monday, we'll have this one up. Now, as we're going through, if you have any technical issues, if you have trouble with being able to hear the webinar, maybe you get disconnected, if you're still in the Zoom room, post that in the chat box and one of our team will help you. If you have been maybe disconnected, make sure and email us at oie@seiservices.com, and one of our team will help you there to get reconnected to the webinar. With us today, we have Dr. Donna Savis-Burns, the OIE Discretionary Group Leader, as well as Donna Bussell, who is the NYCP Competition Manager and Program Officer. And you'll be hearing more from them as we go throughout today. Now, this is kind of just an overview of what we'll be talking about today. We're going to give you a good overview of the whole NYCP grant competition, including the purpose of this grant program, eligibility, and what funding is available. We're going to talk about the absolute and competitive preference priorities, the selection criteria. Also, we'll talk about the application instructions and how you can submit your application. And we'll do a nice review of resources available to you. What would we like for you to get out of today's webinar? Well, we want you to learn what's in the fiscal year 2022 grant application package, understand those application requirements. We also want you to understand why a logic model is needed to strengthen your project narrative. We want you to know what the selection criteria are, what type of forms are required of your application, as well as some common components of applying for federal grants and using our federal application systems. And finally, we want to provide you with the opportunity to be able to submit questions. Now, as we begin, we would like to know a little more about you, though. So we'd love to know what type of eligible applicant might you be? So I'm going to pop a chat poll up here. It should appear on your screen. If you are joining us from a mobile device, sometimes you do have to swipe over to get to the poll, just depending upon what type of device you're joining from. If you're on a computer, though, it should magically pop up for you here. And if you could indicate which type of entity are you representing? A tribe, a tribal education agency, a BIE-funded school, a TCU, an Indian organization. Maybe you're an LEA with a consortium or partnership, or an SEA with a consortium or partnership. And if you're wondering about some of these acronyms, TCU being a tribally controlled university, LEA, a local education agency, and SEA, a state education agency. All right. See some of us going ahead and getting in the poll. I'm going to give you just a few more seconds to respond to that poll. If one of these does not apply to you or you're not sure, you're also welcome to post your type of entity over in the chat. All right. About 70% of us have participated, so I'm going to go ahead and end that poll so that we can see. And you'll see that we have really a good mix today. pretty evenly distributed amongst tribes, BIE funded schools, Indian organizations, LEAs, and SEAs. So a nice mix of folks joining us for our webinar today. A couple of really important notes as we get started today. So this webinar, while very informative, only presents a portion of the required information available about this grant competition. In order for you to have the full details of this grant competition, be sure to read the notice inviting applications and the application package. Remember that you must follow instructions on grants.gov and processes such as DUNS and SAM. It's also important to note that these common instructions supersede the version that was published on February 13th, 2019, and describe the transition from the requirement to register in SAM.gov with a DUNS number to the implementation of the new UEIs, the unique entity identifiers. So a little bit more information on this. As we transition from DUNS to UEIs, that is actually going to start April 4th. So really soon, and while you're preparing your proposal. If you currently have a DUNS number that is registered in SAM.gov, then you're automatically having a corresponding UEI assigned to you, and you're set for that transition. And you'll be able to find that in SAM.gov. If you're not sure, if you're like, I don't know if my DUNS number is registered or not, sign into SAM.gov, go to search, select the entity information domain, and you'll be able to put the DUNS number in for your entity. Make sure to check both the active and inactive boxes on that search filter. If it comes back with a result, you're good. You have a DUNS number in the system, you're going to automatically have a UEI. But if it comes back and says no match is found, then you do need to register that DUNS number. So then you're going to go to step 2 on this slide here, where if you don't have a DUNS number registered in SAM.gov, you need to do that by March 25th. That's by the end of next week. So it's important for you to look into this in a timely manner. You'll be able to go onto SAM.gov and select register an entity. Don't select get a unique entity ID. You want to register your entity. So register your DUNS number, and then the system will assign you a UEI. Now, if you want more information about this, there is a UEI transition fact sheet with more information that's linked here. And at the end of the webinar, we'll be giving you this entire slide deck that has the clickable links so you can go through to any of the things that we referenced today. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Donna Bussell to give you an overview of this NYCP 2022 grant competition.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you everybody for being on the call today. We hope that we can answer your questions the best way possible. And we will go through our NYCP 2022 grant competition overview. We'll start with the purpose of the NYCP program. And you will see this again, but we wanted to state our definition of the NYCP program. And that is a Native Youth Community Project, and it means that a project that is focused on a defined local geographic area. It's centered on the goal of ensuring that Indian students are prepared for college and career. It's informed by evidence, which would be either a needs assessment conducted within the last 3 years or other data analysis on these 3 things: the greatest barriers, both in and out of school, to the readiness of local Indian students for college and careers, opportunities in the local community to support Indian students, and existing local policies, programs, practices, service providers, and funding sources. We'll continue with our NYCP background. Oh, did I miss this slide? I missed this slide. The rest of the purpose, I'm sorry, we'll go back to that. The number 4 on the purpose of the NYCP program. It's focused on 1 or more barriers or opportunities with a community-based strategy or strategies and measurable objectives, designed and implemented through a partnership of various entities, which must include A, 1 or more tribes or their tribal education agencies, and 1 or more BIE funded schools, 1 or more LEAs, or both, and may include other optional entities, including community-based organizations, national nonprofit organizations, and Alaska Regional Corporation. And it's led by an entity that is eligible for a grant under the demonstration program and demonstrates or partners with an entity that demonstrates the capacity to improve outcomes that are relevant to the project focus through experience with programs funded through other sources. So now we'll go on to our NYCP background. So our NYCP background, we are looking at supporting community-led comprehensive projects to help American Indian Alaska Native children become college and career ready. It's designed to help communities improve educational outcomes for Native youth, specifically college and career readiness through strategies tailored to address the specific challenges and build upon the specific opportunities and culture within a community. Such strategies can include supplemental academic programs or courses, social emotional services, cultural education, or other support services for American Indian and Alaskan Native students and families. We'll go forward with our NYCP background. So it's based on a partnership that includes at least one tribe in one school district or Department of the Interior Bureau of Indian Education or BIE funded school. Facilitates capacity building within the community, generating positive results and practices for students' college and career readiness beyond the period of the federal financial assistance. And the requirement in this competition for a written partnership agreement helps to ensure that all relevant partners needed to achieve the project goals are included from the outset. So lastly, in our NYCP background, it's to promote equity and student access to educational resources and opportunities. This competition includes a competitive preference priority to encourage projects that bridge the purpose of NYCP to improve Native children and youth's college and career readiness, and the Secretary's supplemental priority on promoting equity and student access to educational resources and opportunities by supporting community-led projects that engage school-age children in career exploration opportunities, with an emphasis on learning about the teaching profession. So by increasing exploration of the teaching profession among Native youth, the department hopes to recruit future educators from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds or the communities that they serve. So our NYCP overview, eligible applicants. We have, if you're a tribe, a tribal education agency, Bureau of Indian Education or BIE funded school, a TCU, an Indian organization, or an LEA with a consortium or a partnership with the above mentioned, or SCA with a consortium or partnership with the above mentioned. And if you're applying as a consortium, applicants should refer to the 34 CFR 75-127 through 75-129 for information about group applications. Estimated funds available are 18 million up to 60 months. The estimated range of awards are 400,000 to 500,000. The estimated size of the awards are 475,000. And the application deadline, which is really important, is April 19th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So our eligible applicants, again, is an SEA, a state education agency, an LEA, which is a local education agency, including charter schools that are considered LEA under the state law, an Indian tribe, an Indian organization, a federally supported elementary school or secondary school for Indian students, a TCU, tribally controlled university, or an LEA with consortium or partnerships with the above mentioned, or an SEA with a consortium or partnership with above mentioned. And again, if you're applying as a consortium, please refer to that CFR that we have listed at the bottom. So what is a consortium agreement? 75-129 states that it's a legal responsibilities of each member of the group. If the secretary makes a grant to a group of eligible applicants, the applicant for the group is the grantee and is legally responsible for the use of all grant funds, ensuring that the project is carried out by the group in accordance with federal requirements, and ensuring that the indirect cost funds are determined as required by 75-564E. Each member of the group is legally responsible to carry out the activities it agrees to perform and use the funds that it receives under the agreement in accordance with the federal requirements that applies to the grant. Eligible parties, did I miss that slide? I did miss that slide. Yes, eligible parties may apply as a group. Who acts as an applicant, the group agreement. So 75-127 and 75-128 are the regulations that states what is meant by a consortium agreement. If a group or eligible parties applies for a grant, the members of the group shall either designate one member of the group to apply for the grant or establish a separate eligible legal entity to apply for the grant. The members of the group shall enter an agreement that the details, the activities that each member of the group plans to perform, and binds each member of the group to every statement and assurance made by the applicant in the application. The applicants shall submit the agreement with its application. I did that slide right before. So we'll go to the notice of intent to apply. And this date has passed. It was March 10th. It's not required at all. It's not required, but it's strongly encouraged. If you still want to send, I believe you can still send a notice of intent to apply. It's just your name, your address, contact person's name, contact person's email, consortium partners if applicable. So we'll go over the priorities in the competition, and it contains one absolute priority and 3 competitive preference priorities. And we'll go over our absolute priority first. This absolute priority is just as it states, it's absolute, it's necessary for you to be eligible. The project must be designed to ensure that local Indian students are prepared for college and careers. So again, the definition of a Native Youth Community Project is focused on a defined local geographic area, centered on the goal of ensuring that Indian students are prepared for college and careers, informed by evidence which could either be either a needs assessment conducted within the last 3 years or other data analysis that is on the greatest barriers, both in and out of school, to the readiness of local Indian students for college and careers, opportunities in the local community to support Indian students, and existing local policies, programs, practices, service providers, and funding sources. Next slide. So the next part of this, so number 4, the absolute priority is focused on one or more barriers or opportunities with a community-based strategy or strategies and measurable objectives. Number 5 states that it's designed and implemented through a partnership of various entities, which must include one or more tribes or their tribal education agencies, and one or more BIE funded schools, one or more local educational agencies, LEAs, or both, and may include other optional entities, including community-based organizations, national nonprofit organizations, and Alaska regional corporations. And number 6 is led by an entity that is eligible for a grant under the Demonstration Grants for Indian Children and Youth Program, and demonstrates our partners with an entity that demonstrates the capacity to improve outcomes that are relevant to the project focus through experience with programs funded through other sources. Those were your absolute priorities. Those have to be met. These are your competitive preference priorities. To meet these are points that can be awarded. So if you are looking to get extra points on your competition application, you will look at meeting these priorities. So we'll look at competitive preference priority 1. That is an additional 5 points awarded, and we'll go through every single one of these in detail. Competitive preference priority 2 is an additional 3 points awarded, and competitive preference priority 3 is an additional 7 points awarded. Now, you cannot claim competitive preference priority 1 and 2 together. That is not allowed, but you can look at getting competitive preference priority 1 and 3, which is a maximum of 12 points awarded, or competitive preference priority 2 and 3, which is a maximum 10 points awarded. But we cannot do 1 and 2. That is not allowed. 1 and 2 together. So we'll look at competitive preference priority 1. This is tribal lead applicants. So if you're looking to get anywhere from 0 to 5 points, applications must be submitted by an Indian tribe, an Indian organization, a school funded by the Bureau of Indian Education, which is a BIE funded school, tribal college or university, and a group application submitted by a consortium that meets the requirements of 34 CFR 75-127 through 75-129, or submitted by a partnership is eligible to receive the preference only if the lead applicant for the consortium is an Indian tribe, Indian organization, BIE funded school, or TCU. That's for competitive preference priority 1. That's to get 0 or 5 points. Competitive preference priority 2 are tribal partnerships. This is anywhere from 0 to 3 points. So to get these points, an application must be submitted by a consortium of eligible entities that meets the requirements of 34 CFR 75-127 through 75-129, or submitted by a partnership if the consortium or partnership 1 includes an Indian tribe, Indian organization, BIE funded school, or TCU, and number 2 is not eligible to receive the preference under competitive preference priority 1. And our number 3 priority is promoting equity and student access to educational resources and opportunities. There's 0 to 7 or 7 points awarded to this CPP. An applicant must demonstrate that the applicant proposes a project designed to promote educational equity and adequacy in resources and opportunity for underserved students. In one or more of the following educational settings: an elementary school, a middle school, a high school, career and technical education programs, out of school time settings, alternative schools and programs. So that can be in one or more of those following education settings. We'll continue with CPP 3. So on the next slide, in order to receive the 0 or 7 points, an application that examines the sources of inequity and inadequacy and implements responses, and that includes increasing the number and proportion of experienced, fully certified in-field and effective educators and educators from traditionally underserved, underrepresented backgrounds or the communities that they serve, to ensure that underserved students have educators from those backgrounds and communities and are not taught at a disproportionately higher rates by uncertified, out-of-field, and novice teachers compared to their fields. And this competitive preference priority 3 does have a scoring rubric. This rubric is in the application instructions that you will find at grants.gov. So that rubric is inside the application instructions. You'll have to go to grants.gov and download those application instructions. But we'll go over the scoring rubric right now. So we have anywhere from 0 to 7 points for our competitive preference priority 3. And 0 points is where an applicant does not make any reference anywhere in the application to proposing a project designed to promote educational equity and adequacy in resources and opportunities for underserved students that would increase the number that would support CPP3. So if you don't make any reference anywhere in the application, it is 0 points. For 1 point, we're looking at if there's a very short term, such as a standalone event to promote this competitive preference priority 3. Number 2, to get 2 points, applicant proposes a 1 semester course or summer after school program for students that would include training in a combination of core academic subjects and pedagogical instructional strategies to support CPP3. For 3 points, an applicant would propose required participation in a credit-bearing course for students that would include training or a combination of core academic subjects and pedagogical instructions strategies that would support CPP3. For 4 points, the same criteria that was stated to gain those 3 points would be in the application as activities and projects, as well as job shadowing activities for students that would support competitive preference priority 3. To get 5 points, again, the same criteria that you would use to get 4 points, as well as dual enrollment opportunities for participating students at a local 2 or 4-year degree granting institution of higher education, an IHE, or tribal college or university to support competitive preference priority 3. In order to get 6 points, the same criteria that we did to get 5 points, we're going to do that, as well as an active and ongoing collaboration between the LEA and the nearby tribes that it serves to build on existing initiative or supports a new initiative training in culturally relevant knowledge and skills that would increase and support competitive preference priority 3. And for 7 points, which this is a big haul for 7 points, but the same criteria for 6 points, an applicant would propose, as well as actively engage a local TCU and or other IHE in developing a strategic plan that supports a systematic response to hiring Native teachers. So here's, we'll go over some examples. These are just examples, broad examples. You don't want to copy these examples down exactly in your application. We'd like to see, but we would like to see some examples of the activities that you would be doing and performing in order to get these competitive preference points. For example 0, again, there's no reference, no activities that meet the CPP3. To get 1 point, as we stated, you would do a very short-term 1-day standalone events, such as a guest speaker that comes in and speaks on careers in education. For 2 points, an example would be a summer camp where students learn to create learning activities for younger students. For the 3 points, an example to getting the 3 points would be creating a high school credit-bearing child development course. Again, these are just examples. These aren't what you would have to do. So for 4 points, you would do the same criteria for 3, as well as job shadowing activities. So an example of this is incorporating an internship with an elementary teacher, perhaps alongside the child development course. For the 5 points, an example of getting all 5 points would be creating a dual enrollment child development course that incorporates an internship with an elementary teacher. And for 6 points, an example of gaining these 6 points would be something like creating a dual enrollment child development course that incorporates an internship with an elementary teacher and collaborates with the tribe to incorporate cultural activities. And for the full 7 points, an example would be creating a dual enrollment child development course that incorporates an internship with an elementary teacher, collaborates with the tribe to incorporate cultural activities, and provides a future teacher track at the local TCU, as well as a maybe a study on how we could improve our Native American teachers or underserved, underrepresented teachers in that community or that area. So now we're going to look over our GEPRA measures. Our Government Performance Results Act. These are the department's indicators of success. Sarah, is this one yours? Is it still me?
It's you, but I'm happy to take it if you'd like.
Okay. I just got messed up on our numbers.
No worries.
I got it. I'm sorry. The department's indicators of success for the NYCP program. That's what our GEPRA measures are. And the applicant carefully considers these measures whenever you're conceptualizing your approach to an evaluation for your proposed project. The grantee will be required to provide in its annual performance and final reports data about its progress in meeting these measures. So these are GEPRA measures that are indicators of success, and you should really look at these GEPRA measures whenever you're creating your measurements and how to approach and evaluate for your project. And we'll look over these GEPRA measures. So one of our GEPRA measures is increase in community collaboration. This is the significant increase in community collaboration efforts that promotes college and careers of Indian children. And it is as measured by increases in the number of active community partnerships. And that's active community partnerships that promote college and careers of Indian children. And our other GEPRA measure is the percentage of annual measurable objectives as described in the application that are being met. So as you're creating your application, you're describing these program measures that you want to meet. And this is how we, these GEPRA measures look at the percentage of these annual measurable objectives and how many of those are met during your time. So this is why it's important to make sure you look at these GEPRA measures whenever you're creating your application.
All right, so that brings us to our first question section, and we do have a few questions that we've received in the chat box, so we'll run through those. The first being, would an ANSCA Corps established education nonprofit be considered a tribal organization?
To be an eligible applicant, is that what that
Yes.
question means? If you are under your tribe, I will go back to the eligible applicants. The following entities, either alone or in consortium, are eligible under this program. An Indian tribe, Indian organization, federally supported elementary school, secondary school, tribal controlled university, LEA, SCA. So you would have to provide the information that you are an Indian tribe or an Indian organization.
Okay.
Right, Sarah?
Great.
Help me out as I go.
Yep. And then the next question was a super easy one. Can we have a copy of the slides? Yes. We will be posting in the chat a copy of the slides for everyone at the end of the webinar, as well as they are already posted on the Office of Indian Education website on the How to Apply page. So we do have that available for you. Next up, I represent a 501c3 urban Indian health organization that partners with a public school district for an on-site continuation school for Native youth clients at our facility. Are we eligible?
So for any of the eligible questions, I would refer to the NIA. So I would go back and look at that NIH and read over the eligible applicants and discuss with your partners if you are eligible. So I would always refer back to the NIA for that.
And we can post that NIE in the chat box again for everybody so that you can look over those eligible applicants and any applicable definitions. Next up, is that 475 yearly or for the life of the grant?
And then I'll go back to that question. I'm sorry, Sarah, for that. We just had your, as a nonprofit, it needs to be an education based in their mission.
Great, thank you.
Does that help? Okay, sorry, can you repeat that last question?
No problem.
Nonprofits need to be an education base.
Yeah, and so that would refer back to our last question about an urban Indian health organization. You would need to have an education focus. And then the next question asking about, is the 475,000 yearly or for the life of the grant in reference to the estimated average size of award?
As an average size, it's yearly, as I remember from Ms. Savis Burns.
Yeah, so that's an annual amount.
And you have up to, the annual amount, and you have up to 60 months. So as you're preparing your budget, just be sure to make sure you don't go over those 60 months.
Yeah. All right, there was a question about what the notice of intent to apply needed to have in it. If you would like to still submit a notice of intent to apply, we can pop that slide back up as far as emailing it to Donna Bussell. And here are the items that you would want to include in that. Next question. Let's see, we covered that one. Is a single tribal applicant required and eligible only when applying with another agency, as in collaboration, or can a tribe apply alone?
So the following entities, we'll go back to our eligible applicants. The following entities, either alone or in a consortium, are eligible under this program: an SEA, LEA, that includes charter schools that are considered LEAs under state law, Indian tribe, Indian organization, federally supported elementary school or secondary school for Indian students, such as a BIE, and a tribal college or university, such as a TCU. The absolute priority for NYCP requires that an applicant be a member of a partnership that includes at least one tribe or its TEA and at least one LEA or BIE funded school.
Yeah, so again, referring back to the NIA, to those eligible applicants that can apply alone or in a consortium. The final question that we have right now was if we could go back to review the focus of the grant projects again, such as the increase in Native teachers. So all of this is also in the NIA, so you can review that, but I can go back to the slide regarding that competitive preference priority regarding Native teachers. And that's competitive preference priority 3.
And again, for preference priority 3, there is a rubric that is in the application instructions that you will find on grants.gov that you can go by. And just for reference on the question that was before this, again, the absolute priority for NYCP requires that an eligible applicant, be a member of a partnership that includes at least one tribe or its TEA and at least one LEA or BIE funded school. So again, tribes can apply alone, but they'll need to partner with an LEA TEA or BIE funded school.
All right. And for the individual who had a question about the focus of the grant projects, if that didn't fully answer your question, if you could just put a follow-up question in the chat box, we're happy to address that as well. And we will move to the next section. So next, we're going to take a look at application requirements. So for fiscal year 2022 and any subsequent year in which we make awards from the list of unfunded applications for this competition, applicants do have to meet the following application requirements, which are from section 6121 of the ESEA and 34 CFR 263.22. Each application must contain a description of how Indian tribes and parents and families of Indian children and youth have been and will be involved in developing and implementing the proposed activities. B, assurances that the applicant will participate at the request of the secretary in any national evaluation of this program. C, information demonstrating that the proposed project is evidence-based where applicable or is based on an existing evidence-based program that has been modified to be culturally appropriate for Indian students. D, a description of how the applicant will continue the proposed activities once the grant period is over. E, evidence, which could be either a needs assessment conducted within the last 3 years or other data analysis of the greatest barriers both in and out of school to the readiness of local Indian students for college and career, opportunities in the local community to support Indian students, and existing local policies, programs, practices, service providers, and funding sources. You'll also need a copy of an agreement signed by the partners in the proposed project, identifying the responsibilities of each partner in the project. That agreement can be either a consortium agreement that meets the requirements of 34 CFR 75.128 if each of the entities are eligible entities under this program. And remember, we talked before about the requirements of a consortium agreement, or it could be another form of partnership agreement, such as a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement, if not all the partners are eligible entities under this program. You'll also need a plan, which includes measurable objectives to evaluate reaching the project goal or goals. And finally, an assurance that services will be supplemental to the education program provided by local schools attended by the students to be served. Funding will also be supplemental to existing sources such as Johnson O'Malley funding, and the availability of funds for supplemental special ed and related services, i.e. services that are not part of the special education and related services, supplementary aids and services, and program modifications or supports for school personnel that are required to make a free appropriate public education, known as FAPE, available under Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as IDEA, to a child with a disability in conformity with the child's individualized education program, their IEP, or the regular or special ed and related aids and services required to make FAPE available under a Section 504 plan, if any, does not affect the right of the child to receive FAPE under Part B of the IDEA or Section 504 and the respective implementing regulations. Now, we have a few important definitions. If you look in the NIA, there are a number of other definitions in there that are helpful for you as you're preparing your proposal, but there are a few in particular that we wanted to call out to you. The first is demonstrates a rationale. That's a key project component included in the project's logic model, is informed by research or evaluation findings that suggest the project component is likely to improve relevant outcomes. Next is evidence-based. Demonstrates a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes or other relevant outcomes based on either strong evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented experimental study, or moderate evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented quasi-experimental study, or promising evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented correlational study with statistical controls for selection bias, Or it could demonstrate a rationale based on high quality research findings or positive evaluation that such activity, strategy, or intervention is likely to improve student outcomes or other relevant outcomes. And it includes ongoing efforts to examine the effects of such activity, strategy, or intervention. Just a couple other definitions of importance. Logic model, also known as a theory of action. This would be a framework that identifies key project components of the proposed project, i.e. the active ingredients that are hypothesized to be critical to achieving the relevant outcomes. And it describes the theoretical and operational relationships among the key project components and relevant outcomes. Next is a project component. That would be an activity, strategy, intervention, process, product, practice, or policy included in your project. And finally, relevant outcome. This would be a student outcome or other outcome that the key project component is designed to improve, consistent with the goals of your program. All right, that brings us to selection criteria. So as we move into this section, we're going to be looking at the selection criteria that will be used to score each of the proposals. The first selection criteria is the need for project. In determining the need for the proposed project, the Secretary will consider one or more of the following factors. One, the extent to which specific gaps or weaknesses in services, infrastructure, or opportunities have been identified and will be addressed by the proposed project, including the nature and magnitude of those gaps or weaknesses. That's worth up to 4 points. The magnitude of the need for the services to be provided or the activities to be carried out by the proposed project, that's up to 3 points. And the extent to which the proposed project will provide services or otherwise address the needs of students at risk of educational failure for up to 3 points. The need for project category is worth a total of 10 points. Next is the quality of project design. Here, the Secretary will consider the quality of the design of the proposed project. In determining the quality of the design of the proposed project, the Secretary is going to consider the following factors. First, the extent to which the design for implementing and evaluating the proposed project will result in information to guide possible replication of project activities or strategies, including information about the effectiveness of the approach or strategies employed by the project. That's worth up to 10 points. The extent to which the goals, objectives, and outcomes to be achieved by the proposed project are clearly specified and measurable is worth up to 5 points. The extent to which the design of the proposed project includes a thorough, high-quality review of the relevant literature, a high-quality plan for project implementation, and the use of appropriate methodological tools to ensure successful achievement of project objectives, worth up to 7 points. Next is the extent to which the proposed project demonstrates a rationale as defined in this notice. Remember, we just discussed the definition of demonstrates a rationale. That's worth up to 10 points. And finally, the extent to which the methods of evaluation include the use of objective performance measures that are clearly related to the intended outcomes of the project and will produce quantitative and qualitative data to the extent possible, another up to 5 points. Quality of project design is worth up to 37 points in this category. Next is the quality of project personnel. The Secretary considers the quality of the personnel who will carry out the proposed project. In determining that quality of project personnel, they'll consider the following factors. The extent to which the applicant encourages applications for employment from persons who are members of groups that have traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability, worth up to 6 points. Next, the qualifications including relevant training and experience of the project director or principal investigator, up to 3 points. And the qualifications including relevant training and experience of key project personnel, up to 3 points. The quality of project personnel is worth up to 12 points for this category. And you'll also notice in the notice of intent to apply that there is a native hiring preference for this program. Next up is the quality of the project services. The Secretary considers the quality of the project services. In determining the quality of project services, they'll consider the following factors. The extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed project involve the collaboration of appropriate partners for maximizing the effectiveness of project services. Up to 5 points for this. And then the extent to which the services to be offered would meet the needs of the local population, as demonstrated by an analysis of community level data, including direct input from parents and families of Indian children and youth, another 5 points. That's a total of 10 points for the quality of project services category. Next is the quality of the management plan. So the secretary will consider the quality of the management plan for the proposed project. And in determining that quality of the management plan, they'll consider these following factors: the adequacy of the management plan to achieve the objectives of the proposed project on time and within budget, including clearly defined responsibilities, timelines, and milestones for accomplishing project tasks. That's worth up to 14 points. How the applicant will ensure that a diversity of perspectives are brought to bear in the operation of the proposed project, including those of parents, teachers, the business community, a variety of disciplinary and professional fields, recipients or beneficiaries of services, or others as appropriate, another 5 points. And then the extent to which the proposed project is designed to build capacity and yield results that will extend beyond the period of federal financial assistance, another 5 points. So the quality of the management plan category is worth up to 24 points. And then the final category being the quality of the project evaluation. In considering the quality of the evaluation to be conducted of the proposed project, the secretary will consider the following: the extent to which the methods of evaluation will provide performance feedback and permit periodic assessment of progress toward achieving intended outcomes, worth up to 4 points. And the extent to which the evaluation will provide guidance about effective strategies suitable for replication or testing in other settings, for another 3 points. So the total available for quality of the project evaluation is 7 points in this category. So that's our last selection criteria category, and brings us to our next question and answer section. All right, so the first one is an eligibility question, asking, can you confirm that a tribe can apply with a TEA, a tribal educational agency?
So in your NIA, underneath absolute priority, if you go down to number 5, it states designed and implemented through a partnership of various entities, which must include one or more tribes or their tribal education agencies, and one or more BIE funded schools, or one or more local education agencies, which are LEAs or both, and may include optional entities, including community-based organizations, national nonprofit organizations, and Alaska regional corporations. And number 6 is led by an entity that is eligible for a grant under the Demonstrations for Indian Children and Youth Program. And then you'll go to your eligibility portion in the NIA, and the eligible applicants, it's part 3, the eligibility information. So the following entities, either alone or in a consortium, are eligible under this program: SCA, LEA, including charter schools, Indian tribe, Indian organization, federally supported elementary school or secondary school for Indian students at TCU. So look at your absolute priority and your eligibility information in order to make sure.
And currently that is the only question that is in the chat. If there are any other questions that someone has at this time, please make sure to post those in the chat box and we'll address those. So I believe the question is saying, are all of these applicants listed here able to apply alone, or do they require partnership?
So in your absolute priority, again, on number 5, it's designed and implemented through a partnership of various entities, which must include, again, one or more tribes or their tribal education agencies, and one or more BIE funded schools, or one or more local education agencies. So there needs to be a partnership.
Great. All right, so that is the last question we have currently. Continue posting your questions in the chat, and I'll turn it over to Donna for application instructions.
Okay. We'll go over our application instructions. Go ahead. So our NYCP application package is your guide to all the required components of this application, and you can find it at grants.gov. The link is there for you. The opportunity number is ed-grants-021-822-001. The following information being presented this is an abbreviated information from the application package, and this webinar does not substitute for reading the application package, the NIA in its entirety. We'll go forward. So the department-specific application guidance within both the FY 2022 NYCP NIA and the application instructions package, you will find reference to common instructions for applicants to the Department of Education discretionary grant programs published in the Federal Register on February 13th, 2019, AF 84 FR 3768, and available at the link that is there for you. And the common instructions give detailed guidance on SAM, DUNS, and other common elements of the application. So the electronic application checklist. Part 1 is the preliminary documents, the application for federal assistance or the form SF 424, the Ed supplemental information for SF 424. Part 2 is budget information. That's the budget information for non-construction programs. It's Ed form 524. And part 3 is the abstract form, the project abstract. And the electronic application checklist going forward. Part 4 is the project narrative. Part 5 is your budget narrative. And part 6 are other attachments as necessary, other attachments as needed. Part 7 is the assurances and certifications. So that's your disclosure of lobbying activities. That is the grants.gov lobbying form. Certification regarding lobbying. That's the Ed form 80-0013 form. The GEPA, the General Education Provisions Act. And I can't see that last one, Sarah. This is not. I can't get this little screen off. Give me 1 second.
Okay. So for part 7, assurances and certifications, it's that disclosure of lobbying activities, the grants.gov lobbying form, that certification regarding lobbying, and then the GEPA requirements, the General Education Provisions Act.
Okay. Okay. So here's part 1, the SF 424 applications for federal assistance form. This is a standard form. It includes corresponding instructions. For item 9, be sure that the applicant type you identify in this form matches how you will self-identify in the application abstract. And part 1 is our Ed supplemental information, the SF 424. This is a standard form and this standard form includes the corresponding instructions. So part 2 is your budget form, Ed 524. Use Ed form 524 section A. Section B is non-federal funds are optional. Remember that you must provide all requested budget information for each of the 5 years of the project up to 60 months and the total column in order to be considered for federal funding. No more than 5% of the funds awarded for a grant may be used for administrative cost. This is an example of this budget form. Make sure all budget information in it here matches with your submitted budget narrative, including your indirect cost information. This is to be completed by your business office, but make sure all of that is completed on this form. Part 5 is the budget narrative attachment form. The budget narrative serves as section C of Ed Form 524. Be sure to complete an itemized budget breakdown and narrative for each year of the proposed project, up to 60 months. Review and edit to ensure that the total funding listed in each year in your budget narrative match the total amounts entered in the Ed Form 524 Part 2. Identify the nature and the amount of the proposed expenditures and provide sufficient detail for readers to understand. Part 3 is your abstract. The project abstract should not exceed 2 double-spaced pages and should identify the applicant, including all consortium members if applicable, and should concisely describe the following: your project title, institution, eligibility, partners, priorities, indicate the absolute priority and which, if any, of the competitive preference priorities that you're claiming that your project is addressing. Number 6 is your brief description of the proposed project goals and objectives, and indicate how many students will be served. So on grants.gov, it may include a note that indicates the project abstract may not exceed 1 page. However, an abstract of more than 1 page may be uploaded. So we'll go to part 4 of your project narrative. This is the project narrative attachment form. This is the application narrative. No more than 30 pages and use the following standards. You can see there that a page is 8.5 by 11 on one side with 1-inch margins at the top and bottom on both sides. Double space, all text in the application narrative, including titles, headings, footnotes, quotations, references, captions, as well as all text and charts, tables, figures, and graphs. Use a font that is either 12 point or larger, no smaller than 10 pitch. Use one of the following fonts: Times New Roman, Courier, Courier New, or Arial. And part 6 is your other attachments. These are things like your letters of support, resumes, bibliography, any signed consortium agreements that we discussed earlier. And part 7. Part 7 is your assurances and certifications. This is disclosure of lobbying activities, which is the SFLLL form. Grants.gov lobbying form certification regarding lobbying, which is the Ed 80-0013 form. General Education Provisions Act, which is the GEPA requirements, section 427. So our application requirements, where in the application to address them. So we're looking at the description of the defined geographic area to be served by the project, which could be a map, written description, or some other document. You can include a full explanation in the application project narrative. You can address these in the need for project subcriterion 1 and 2 and quality of project services subcriterion 2. The evidence of need drawn from a needs assessment or other analysis of data that shows these 3, the greatest barriers, opportunities in the local community, and existing local policies. These can be addressed briefly in your abstract. They can also be addressed in your narrative in the need for project subcriterion 1 and 2 and the quality of project services subcriterion 2. The next, information demonstrating that the proposed project is based on scientific research where applicable, or an existing program that has been modified to be culturally appropriate for Indian students. You can include a full explanation in the under the quality of project evaluation subcriterion 2 and quality of project design subcriterion 3. To address a plan which includes measurable objectives to evaluate reaching the project goal or goals. Applicants may address these under project evaluation subcriterion 2, quality of management plan subcriterion 1, quality of the project design subcriterion 1, 2, 3, or 4, and a description of how the applicant will continue the proposed activities once the grant period is over. This narrative should be brief, for example, 1 double-spaced page, and describe the entities and their commitments to continuing the project activities following the grant. You can address these under the quality of management plan subcriterion 3, quality of project design subcriterion 2 and 5, project evaluation subcriterion 2. And lastly, a copy of the agreement signed by the partners in proposed project, identifying responsibilities of each partner in the project. Signatures to the agreement must include at least one tribe or its TEA and at least one LEA or BIE funded school as described in the absolute priority. Letters of support do not meet the requirement for a signed agreement. Applicants may address these under quality of project design subcriterion 3 and quality of project services subcriterion 1. And it can be uploaded separate as a separate attachment in grants.gov following the format guidelines. Evidence that the applicant or one of its partners has demonstrated the capacity to improve outcomes that are relevant to the project focus through experience with programs funded through other sources. You can briefly address this in your abstract, and you can also address this under quality of project services subcriterion 1 and quality of the management plan subcriterion 1. A description of how Indian tribes and parents of Indian children have been and will be involved in developing and implementing the proposed activities. Participant goals may be addressed under quality of management plan subcriterion 2, quality of project services subcriterion 2, and the narrative. So eligibility screening and peer review panel. Applications will be screened for eligibility. Notice of ineligibility will be sent by email. All eligible applications will be reviewed by a peer review panel, independently read and scored by 3 peer reviewers. Panel discussions will take place. Ranking order of average final scores will take place by OIE, and a compressed review window will help the reviewers with clear applications.
All right. So applications are due April 19th, 2022 by midnight. So 11:59:59 all the way down to the seconds Eastern time. Very important to remember that these deadlines are on Eastern time. So no matter what time zone you are located in, it is due at midnight Eastern time. Of course, we always encourage early submissions because if something happens, if there's a glitch in the system, if the technology doesn't work quite right, it doesn't change the deadline, and anything received after that will not be eligible. So we're going to move into a review of a few resources available for you before we do our next question section. A few general tips. It is extremely important that you read the notice inviting applications, the NIA, as well as the application package. Read all of the application instructions before, during, and after writing, just to make sure that there's no piece of instruction that you're missing. Start the grants.gov SAM registration process early. And remember that, as we talked about earlier, you want to make sure and check whether your DUNS number is registered on sam.gov before next Friday. Make it easy for the reviewer to find and to understand the information in your proposal. Follow the order of those selection criteria. Proofread, proofread, proofread. Have someone else proofread for you. Once you've looked at something so many times, you won't always notice things. So proofread, proofread, proofread. And then make sure to submit your applications using grants.gov. A few tips for sam.gov. Remember to register and confirm that updated registration early. Again, highly encouraging you to do that before next Friday to ensure that you do not have any issue with that transition from DUNS numbers to the unique entity identifiers, the UEIs. Primary information about SAM is available at sam.gov. We also have user guides, demonstration videos, and other helpful guidance on SAM registration. And remember, we're going to give you the PDF of these slides here momentarily that have all the clickable links as well. Grants.gov issues, if you run into any submission problems. If you do, please make sure to reach out to the grants.gov customer support. We've got their phone number, email, and the knowledge base web portal that you can search. There's also a great FAQ that you can use. They're all there to support you so that the grants.gov experience can be as easy as possible. We did have our first pre-application webinar last Monday. That recording and slide deck are already posted up on the website. The one from today will be up hopefully by end of day Monday, barring any technical issues as well. And then any updates will be provided there on that same NYCP webpage. This is the web link here. You'll know you're in the right place if it looks like this. You'll notice we've also updated just today with a little reminder about that transition from DUNS to UEIs, a little notification there. Any other updates that might occur after today will be posted here on that how to apply page. The application package is available online at grants.gov. You can put in this funding opportunity number. That NIA did come out on February 18th. A few more resources. You can access requirements from 2 CFR Part 200, generally known as the Uniform Guidance, at these links below. They provide lots of great information about the cost principles, about funding basics, things that can be super helpful when developing the budget for your project. We also have a number of resources available for you when creating a logic model. So when looking back at the pieces that relate to a logic model, some great resources here. We also have some video tutorials for applicant training. That's that top one. And again, both pre-application webinars will be housed on that how to apply page. You can reference them whenever you'd like. Now, before we wrap, we do want to take questions again, because I did see a few that had come in. We want to make sure and answer. So does evaluation cost fall outside of the 5% administrative cost cap?
Like hire contracting an evaluator. Is that
I believe that's what they're asking, yes.
Okay, so the administrative cost limitation is under ESEA section 621E. No more than 5% of the funds awarded for a grant may be used for administrative cost. And I'm going to put this, that is in your NIA. So I would go back and refer to the ESEA section 6121, section E, to answer that question further.
And then indirect costs are limited to 5%. Is that correct?
No, indirect cost, and this program uses an unrestricted indirect cost rate. The 5% was about the administrative cost limitation. And let me get this. This is also in your NIA. Mm-hmm. So here's the section of that and the link to go for more information regarding indirect cost or obtain a negotiated indirect cost rate. There's the link for that.
Great. Next question, a cover sheet is referenced in the announcement. Is one required?
So all of your mandatory forms are going to be on grants.gov. They have every single mandatory form that you will need. So I would go and make sure you're reviewing grants.gov to preview your mandatory forms.
Great. The next question being, is the logic model included in the page count for the narrative? Or would that be an attachment that's not included in the page count for the narrative?
If you are using the logic model to address the selection criteria that Sarah went over earlier, then we would put that in the specific places in your narrative.
Yeah. And then is indirect costs, I believe the indirect cost is not associated with the evaluation component of the budget. So I think they're asking if evaluation would be part of indirect cost.
I would have to go look at that. Or Sarah, you could answer that.
Yeah, I believe typically it would not be considered part of indirect cost.
But that link that we did give you, that is in there, discusses what are indirect costs and what you can, how to determine it and what expenses are with indirect cost.
Correct. All right, I believe that is the last question in the chat currently. If you have any other questions, the evaluation is part of the points for the grant. So I will go back to the selection criteria. You'll want to look in the NIA under F, the quality of the project evaluation selection criteria, and that'll give you the information as far as what points are available and what factors are being considered in regards to project evaluation. Great. All right. Any other questions that you might have, please post those in the chat. I do want to make sure everybody has the contact information for Donna Bussell, your program lead and competition manager, as well as the discretionary programs group lead. Again, linked at the bottom of the slide is the direct link to the how to apply page. We're also going to pop in the chat the PDF of today's PowerPoint so that you can have access to that. Again, that will have the clickable links, and it will also be up on that how to apply page, hopefully by end of day Monday, along with the recording of this session. At this time, it doesn't look like we have any further questions in the chat. We will be on for a few more minutes in case you do have a further question. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today for this pre-application webinar for the Native Youth Community Project grant program. We look forward to reviewing all of your proposals. Good luck and have a great weekend.